What is this? Hey, what are we doing here? What's everyone doing here? Hey, welcome to the Huddle Review. This is Jeff. You guys are here on the chain, and guess what? It is Saturday morning. It could be Saturday afternoon in some places. It might even be Saturday evening on the other side of the world over in Australia. I don't know, but I know it's really early on the West Coast, and I appreciate XRP Venture coming on that early to watch us here on the Huddle Review and to participate in this little bit of a diatribe that we're going to go on today. So what are we going to rail against? I don't know. Let's find out, because it's going to be really, really interesting. And, as far as I'm concerned, we are going to want to really dive a little bit deeper into understanding exactly what it really means to have full utility, and without that utility, there's no value. I was going to hit the intro right now, but I don't have the intro loaded up. So no intro. All you got is me and you guys and your comments flowing through the stream. So let's get started. Let's get into this, because you know what? Today is an exciting day. We've got a guest lined up that we're going to be interviewing today at 10 o'clock, and you guys are going to want to tune in when we roll that out, because that's probably going to be airing, I believe, on Thursday evening. So we're going to have about a week of ramp up. When we're done with the interview, we're going to start marketing that interview. I really, really think you guys are going to want to tune in. Now, tomorrow night, I'm doing this shout out because this morning, we're going to talk about cryptocurrency, utility, value, and all sorts of other chaos that's going on. I'm going to give some shout outs to some people that were commenting on my last video. The reason why I'm going to do that is because they had some really amazing comments. But yesterday evening, we interviewed the CEO of Library. If you guys don't know what Library is, go to lbry.tv. If Chip is on here, I know he's out doing other things, but if he's on here in front of a computer and he can throw a link to our Library channel, then you guys want to go check it out. But tomorrow night, Sunday night, on the roundtable, we have the CEO of Library to talk about his blockchain platform that is decentralized video content. And it was really interesting. It was really a great conversation that we had with him yesterday. We really appreciated him coming on. So what is up, David D? Great to have you here. And yeah, you like so I'm going back with the sound. I was trying, David, I tried to do the silent thing, with that whole silent movie thing. I think went out whenever when was that, back in the 20s or whenever that was. So I figured now might be a good time. I tried to rehash, tried to go a little bit avant-garde with the silent stuff. So if you guys need to get your coffee, depending on where you guys are at, make sure you guys check out Death Wish. I highly recommend it. I got no stake in it. I don't own any stock in it, but if you guys go on to Amazon, do yourselves a favor, check out Death Wish on Amazon and read the comments. There's one comment, I swear to God, the only reason why I bought this coffee originally was because of this comment. You go in and this guy wrote a story about why this coffee is so amazing. And so I highly, highly recommend that you guys read that and go check it out, and then order the coffee too, because I think you'll enjoy it. But enough of that. We talked about nonsense for way too long. So let's dive into this. I want to start out with going over utility, because I think that's the one place that we keep tripping ourselves up with. And we have comments. I know I've seen comments on our YouTube channel. I know I've had discussions about it. I know, as I do my own research, I look into it and I ask this one question, and that one question always is, what is moving the cryptocurrency market? And I think it's such a valid question to ask, mainly because, well, we're invested in the cryptocurrency market, and we want to get a good idea of when it's going to move back to that heyday. Now, if you go to the beginning, go all the way back, let's go back in history all the way to 2010. when you started to see the initial rollout of Bitcoin. And it was in those tiny little digits, those little decimal points. And then you go forward a few more years, and then you see the invent of Ripple. And Ripple, as a company, hits the stage, and XRP hits the stage. And then you keep driving a little bit further forward, and you see other digital assets, starting to come out with projects attached to them, like Ethereum and their smart contracts. And then 2017, you started to see a little bit of focus coming from mainstream media, mainstream individuals. You started to see more YouTube content, more media content, more news articles. It became something. And that's where you started to see a major transition. I'm sure it happened way before that major transition. But in terms of the overall identification that, this cryptocurrency thing, this Bitcoin thing, this XRP thing, this Ethereum thing, et cetera, is actually something that we better start focusing and paying attention to it and to what's going on in the space. And so, again, if you go back to the beginning and you look at the valuation and you look at where we are today, you see a major ramp up on all fronts. Every single one of the digital assets has increased exponentially. The ones in the top realm, in the top 10 at least, but those top 3 to 5, all of them, every single one of them went from decimal points to big value in comparison. Bitcoin, obviously, because Bitcoin keeps playing in the thousands dollar range, getting ready to touch 10,000, backing up to 8,000. But if you go back to when it was in its decimal point stage, obviously we know Bitcoin grew significantly. Even XRP, when it was in that 0.006 stage, and now it's sitting at I don't care, 0.18 or 0.20. That's a major increase in valuation. Now, overall, but that's over a period of years. And so everybody, when we go back again and we want to look at that 2017 stage, 2017 to 2018, now all of a sudden at that point, you have this major boom in value. You have this major FOMO period where all crypto just went parabolic. And it was, a lot of it had to do with FOMO, and a lot of it was tied to Bitcoin. Bitcoin moved significantly. All of a sudden, this big attention, and holy crap, Bitcoin is at 20,000. So, and that really, made a major impact. So now, as it scaled backwards, XRP Venture, you've got to get it. That's awesome, man. I don't know which of you're talking about, Death Wish the token or Death Wish the coffee, but I never heard of Death Wish the token. But that seems pretty cool. I don't know. Maybe we got to launch it. We'll launch the token, and then we'll go to the coffee producer and say, hey, by the way, we've got this Death Wish token that we think would work really well with your Death Wish coffee. So just saying. So where were we? I think we were talking about cars and engines. So when you look at the Corvette and the new Corvette with its mid-engine design, it's very reminiscent of the Ferrari body styling. No, so anyhow, so we're looking at Bitcoin. We're looking at the increase in valuation. We're looking at that 2017, 2018 period where you see this big boom, and all these changes are taking place. And then, I still looked, when I was looking at projects and doing my own research on these projects, I said, what is the one underlying factor that's moving this market? And it always tied back to utility. The utility, whether it was Bitcoin as a utility store of value. Some talked about it being a currency. We all know that Bitcoin in its current state can never be a currency at this point, based on how slow it moves, based on the cost of movement, etc. Not going to happen. But then, if you look at, some of the other tokens that can get into that kind of an environment, that can be a rail for moving currency, like XRP, has real world utility for moving money. You want to move small sums of money, large sums of money, and do it across border or even inside. You need that mechanism, and it's amazing to have that mechanism to where you can transfer currency cross border from one country to another in a very short period of time with low cost. And so that's real world utility. Now, here we are, and we're kind of stuck in this space because we keep looking at the currency and we say, what's pushing Bitcoin up to its next phase? Is it utility? Are we storing value in it? And we are starting to see, and this is interesting, because from a store of value and a protection perspective, as a protection mechanism, although many will say, you know what, Bitcoin's not, it's not a protection mechanism. Nobody's putting money over there, but are they, or aren't they? Because right now what we do see is this black swan event in the financial markets that is creating a financial meltdown of epic proportions that we've never seen before in the history of this world, to see the entire globe come to a standstill. I was going to title this video, cryptocurrency and World War III, because we have entered the beginning stages, and it's been going on for a little while. It didn't just start this year. It didn't start last year. This has been fermenting over a period of time, where we've entered a stage of World War III, except the beginning lobs, the beginning volley in the attack is from an economic perspective. Now, we had the subterfuge of the enemy, penetrating into the economy, into the political echelons, and working this mechanism that has had a negative impact. So if we want to look at it, who are the enemies on either side? We have enemies from within, and we have external enemies in this battle. So if we are to look at the sides of this, you have the U.S. and allies on one side, and if you want to look at it from a state perspective, and this is an important aspect of where I'm going with this whole conversation in cryptocurrency utility, and where we're moving, into the next step. But let me take a pause here, because I got to shout out Carl Lewis with his Australian dollars over there, 449. Really appreciate it. OTC just killing it. Keep up the great work. This is extremely, extremely important, I think, to point this out, to highlight this. Now, here we are. I'm sitting over here in the United States. Carl is sitting way over in Australia, and he's given us a shout out. We have global representation. Oh, my chair just collapsed. Look at that. We have global representation in the on the chain community. So we talk about a community for nice. Thanks, Venture. Appreciate that you guys did that split. Appreciate the $4 from Venture and the 49 cents from Carl Lewis. So I'm glad that you guys participated in that. That's awesome. But here we are, the coming together of the minds, how we learn from each other on a global scale. And this is really key, because where we're going with this as an overall, we have some major issues that are happening from an economic perspective. And again, the reason why I bring that up, and as these lines are being drawn from an economic crisis perspective, is that we are entering this phase where we're going to begin to see where, and maybe where it won't, but where cryptocurrency can actually fill the gap, fill the need, and will also then be identifiable in its long time search for real world utility, because it is the real world utility that needs to be applied to cryptocurrency and to the blockchain space in general, that's going to bring about the next major push to the next level. The reason why I mentioned that we're entering into this phase of World War III is because it's real, it exists, it's happening. And as these lines get drawn, again, enemies from within and from without, because there are the powers that be within that are trying to topple the Western ideology of freedom and liberty, whether you're in the United States, Australia, the UK, Canada, Mexico, India. I don't care where you are. You could be anywhere in Europe, outside of maybe Iran, outside of maybe North Korea, outside of Venezuela, outside of many of these different countries. We see a lot of this conflict and tension that takes place over in China. We see their influence and their meddling of affairs. We also look and try to identify from an economic perspective what has been propping up the global economy for so many years. Where has the beacon of truth, the beacon of hope, the beacon of salvation, and the beacon of freedom, where has that come from? Did that come from fascism, socialism, and communism, or did that come from free thought, freedom of monetary gain for the self, freedom of expression, and overall, if we look at the Western ideology, we know that if you go into the Middle East, you have a conflict there as well that's been going on and raging for years upon years upon years, where you have a conflict of ideologies, where you have the Islamist fascist thought process that seeks to really, squash the independent freedoms and liberties under the guise of a religion, and really subjugating the population to live under a totalitarian mindset. But why is this all so critical? It's all critical, as we identify and understand what's happening in the world. We can also then identify that as these events unfold, we start figuring out where we can plug in the cryptocurrency. Why is cryptocurrency and why is blockchain technology so critical at this juncture? And why do we have this opportunity right now where we might start seeing the real world application, the real world utility of blockchain technology being plugged in as maybe a stopgap measure to this crisis that's unfolding around the world? That is, to me, the most critical element of all of this is identifying. Again, we're seeing that the economies crashing around the world. We've seen the borders have been drawn in this economic war, in the war against freedom, in the war against individual preservation, and that is such a critical point. And really, if you want to take that to another level, as you're looking for self-preservation, protection of our rights, protection of our freedom of speech, protection of our own desires and our own capabilities of earning potential, that is where it all starts. So I go on to this diatribe here. So now, as we roll this out again, we're starting to see, and it's so crazy. And I've just been kind of going on this rant. I had this whole thing prepared, and as usual, I start going on to this little bit of a rant here. I get this thought, and I roll with it. But maybe that's what it's all about here this morning anyways, because the HODL review, we want to dive into and review some key topics, some key subjects. But and the reason why I bring all this up is to engage everybody in a thought process, in an exchange of ideas and opinions on the matter. And I bring this up again, and reason why I say our on the chain community is a global community, and it's so far reaching. And every day that we do a broadcast, we bring people, from different areas, people commenting, and I'm sure we have people from across the political spectrum, and it's awesome. We love to have everybody here, and we love to have everyone's engagement, because everybody has the one singular passion, and it's looking at what blockchain technology can do and what cryptocurrency is going to do. Now, if we go back maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I know I've had multiple conversations. People discussed that there was going to be a global economic reset. And I never believed that there would ever be a crisis big enough that could bring about a global economic reset. And the point of that is that with the global economic reset comes an opportunity for cryptocurrency, digital assets, digital currencies to rise to the forefront. Now, it's so crazy because, again, we go back in that period of time, which wasn't that long ago, and here we start having conversations of, we want the Token Taxonomy Act to pass, we want regulatory clarity, we want some normalcy of the cryptocurrency space to bring about utility, because we started to see the suffocating of the crypto assets by a lack of regulation and understanding by the political entities, the political elite, so to speak, whether it's within the US Congress or outside in the world, whether it was in India or whether it was in China, or whether it was in Europe, in Sweden, in Italy, in Spain, down in South America, wherever it was, looking for this understanding that cryptocurrency needs to find normalcy in the space and can't be stepped on, and so then we look at, is there a black swan event that's going to be large enough to create an environment where there could be an economic reset? I never believed it. DNI, I know DNI has talked about it a lot, and it's so interesting that as I start talking about global resets, then guess who pops in? None other than the digital nomad investor. I don't know what it is. I think there was some alert. I think that there's some AI bot running in the background that as soon as I said global reset, DNI got the message and popped in over here. So you need a big sales pitch to lead up to a big event. So there you go, a big sales pitch to lead up to a big event, and that sales pitch now is that we led up to it. And now all of a sudden, we're actually in this big black swan event that the whole global economy came to a standstill. Debt has been rising exponentially. And now we're kind of in a scenario that who knows what can happen. Is this the black swan event that's going to spur the need of cryptocurrency and digital asset to the point where utility will push the value even higher? And so we go back. I've gone on this whole rant, where we started, where we're going. But if you go back to that 2017 moment in time, where for years, you had seen this ramp up. For 7 years, you saw a ramp up. And then, towards the end of 17, all of a sudden it went from a ramp up, it spiked up, and that was the FOMO push. And then it came back down because that FOMO can't hold the value that long. FOMO can only push it, value and utility and everything else, the base, the foundation needs to carry it from there. So FOMO does help, does create the momentum, but then you still need to take it from, there needs to be more foundation that'll take it to the next level. That foundation wasn't there yet. So without that foundation, the market came back down, but it didn't tank and go to zero, which a lot suspected. There's this is going to be the end and it's going to go to zero, and never did go to zero. It went back to where it was meant to be at that point without the full foundation. Now you've seen the architects and the engineers have been constructing that foundation and making it solid, getting ready for that next step. So what did I see here? Hang on a second. Where did that comment go? I know it's here somewhere. Hang on a second. Where'd it go, DNI? Well, this one first. This is the denarian. There will be a reset. China and allies will drive the dollar into the ground. You know what? That's what they're trying to do. And I agree. And that goes back to my premise, is that you have the border, the lines in the sand have been drawn. You have China that is actively pursuing to remove the US currency, the US dollar, as the primary reserve currency in the world. To do that could destabilize the economic markets globally. And it's interesting because the US dollar is the one currency that has never really had to go through any type of a reset. You have a lot of currencies around the world that have been reset. They've added lots of zeros. They've taken a lot of zeros off. And that goes on all over the world. You've seen these changes. You saw it with the euro, and all the European nations decided to come together as the EU and created a new currency. And we've seen fluctuations, but a lot of other countries around the world, China included, have seen major swings in the valuations of their currencies and had to scale their currencies back and cut different zeros off. But now you have entities like a China, and with who knows what their full motivation is, but you have a totalitarian, a communist, brutal communist, centralized, controlled political entity that is trying to then manipulate and have manipulated their currency over periods of years, want to take control and be a major player in the global economics and the global financial system. And we all have to look and say, regardless of where you stand politically, we have to look at that nation and say, you know what, that is not the right nation to control and dictate the direction of the world's economy. I don't care where you're coming from. I don't care what you think about the US dollar. I don't care what country you live in. You all have to look over there and say they aren't the right one. So who their allies are, we don't know exactly. We know that there's some elements within a much larger organization. And at the end of the day, it could very well be that all of these nation states are just pawns on a chessboard in a manipulative game that's being dictated and controlled elsewhere. I don't know. I can only look at what I see at face value and exactly what these nations are doing. However, we see the tension within the U.S. as people have identified this deep state, which a couple of years ago we would have said, you must be crazy. What kind of conspiracy theory, articles are you reading when we talk about this deep state and this manipulation? But now, we have seen, the reality of that unfolding. So it's just crazy, and here's DNI, he's conspiracy fact starts as conspiracy theory, and it's just mind-boggling to me because, again, having this black swan event that would topple global economies, I never believed that would ever happen. I know DNI talked a lot about the global reset and the incrementalism and everything that's been happening around, because we've talked about that a lot. I couldn't see that there would be something, an event large enough that would destabilize where we're at right now. So hang on one second. A little bit of death wish. So let's see here. So yeah, so this is interesting here. You've got the denarian. When the factory gets a bunch of allies to switch from the dollar, done deal. It will be done via tariffs. It's interesting. I think it's where can it happen? Allies of China will get deals. I think so, but it's a matter of who those allies are, and are they willing to put their eggs in that basket? How many nations around the world? And we're starting to see, because through the Belt Road, but I think it's the Belt and Road Initiative from China, where they're investing in about 70 different countries around the world, and they want to utilize their new central bank digital currency to further manipulate those countries. And so again, it's not a matter of if China was a freedom-loving country and we knew that their purpose was honorable, then we wouldn't have an issue in this. The fact that we know that China is not honorable in their political structure gives us a lot of reason for concern when they're entering into this attempt to dominate the global currencies through a central bank digital currency that, although they're entering into this phase of central bank digital currency, it doesn't really adhere to the same principles of the transparent blockchain concept, or the real cryptocurrency that we're all thinking of. It's a centralized controlled mechanism for the state to be further in control of what's happening. We already know how they control and manipulate their own population. We also know, that there's grave concern about some of the technologies that come out of China. We also know that for years and years and years, and whether or not you want to do your own research or not, I know all of this information in this case, firsthand knowledge of what has transpired, from my own dealings over there and from business associates that I've worked with that have dealings over there. My own, experience of trying to deal with certain entities over there, and to see how things have been manipulated, how price points are far exaggerated over there, how how the factories over there have a front door and a back door, and then the branded merchandise goes out the front door and the off-branded merchandise goes out the back door. Knowing from the technology perspective that much of our technology, medical, consumer technology, that technology has been stolen, reverse engineered, and pushed out by other entities and companies and corporations within this country of China. And so they've really stepped all over anything to do with the normalcy of the real world economy and the way the financial systems work. And so the government has maybe permitted a lot of that to happen. There's also some amazing organizations that have come out of China. So we don't want to, go into this diatribe against the individuals and the people of China, but I'm talking more about, the government policy of control, and to see what they've done to destabilize the world governments. And also then in that identifier, to really look at what they're trying to attempt through this Belt Road Initiative, through their central bank digital currency, and through the manipulation, through as we heard, as the denarian, as the denarian brought up, they're allies. The allies are getting together, and so we have to really be very cognizant. So again, I don't care where your feelings fall when it comes to the U.S. or Europe or Africa or Latin America, whatever. We're in this together as a global entity through self-regulation by the people for the people. It's not the governments that should be dictating 100% where we come in from a freedom perspective, where we come in from our economic needs. Obviously, we can't be in an anarchy political environment, because that does not work either. But think about, the government is a representation of the people. The people should not be subjected to the whims of the government. And hence, in the United States, it all falls back on the Constitution. And so when you have the Constitution, and the principles of the Constitution are what give you those rights and those freedoms in your nation, then there's a lot of countries around the world who also benefit from that environment, and they need to keep moving forward with that ideal of the government is there as a representation of the people, not to subject the people to their whims. And then, what does all this have to do with cryptocurrency? Again, going down this tangent. But I think it's really, really important to where we're going. I'm just going back through here because DNI brought up another comment I wanted to post up here. But the rest of the world will switch to a secondary global currency and marginalize the U.S. dollar as the GRC. So we're talking about the GRC, hence the global reserve currency. This is an opportunity, and it is possible that we're going to see an additional global reserve currency. I want to just shout out one rough Rican here real fast. Man, I appreciate you. Always try to bring a little bit of my opinion and thought process, on the matter. I don't try to dwell too much in anything that I haven't done a little bit of research on, that I haven't studied, that I don't believe is based on some factual evidence. So I won't go down a path of just hearsay. I always try to bring my opinions and content again based on where I'm coming from, from a research perspective, and then shouting people out as well. But man, I kind of dwelled a little bit too far. I want to go back, and this is really key because I want to shout some people out from and go back again to the purpose of utility. Man, I had all these articles stacked up that I wanted to go over because there's some stuff that that Visa's doing, and in the digital space. But Visa just applied for a digital dollar blockchain patent. Let me just bring this up real quick because this all factors in when we're looking at utility. Does the crypto space, does blockchain really have real world utility? Is it really meaningful? Now, when you have, for years, we've seen all the big banks, Bank of America, obviously JP Morgan, big entities like Walmart and others that have all been filing patents year after year after year after year in the blockchain and crypto space. And why would they have done that if they didn't believe that it would exist, unless they figured, hey, we might as well do it? But you don't start filing patents. It's not an easy process. It's a lengthy process. But Visa, there's the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office actually published that Visa filed a patent application to create a digital currency on a centralized computer that uses blockchain technology. So Forbes reported this, and it's amazing because here I'll just read out this first sentence here, but this patent applies to digital dollars as well as other central bank digital currencies such as the pound, the yen, the euro. And so the physical currency of a central bank anywhere in the world could be digitized. So Visa's intent, now imagine, Visa's already in this space. They're in the market. Visa's intent is to try to take advantage of and be a part of this rollout of the digital dollars. And they want to use their technology to digitize currencies. And so it's really, really interesting what's happening because, again, you have the central banks, the government pushed cryptocurrencies like in China. Forget about what happened in Venezuela with the petro. I think everyone forgot about that already. But then you have the private industry that is going to be rolling out technology to be the emphasis and the basis and the foundation, for these platforms. Now, not to say that Visa is going to roll out their own currency, but guess what? Governments don't create anything. It's always private industry that creates. It's individuals that create. It's individuals that have that thought process in their brain that then put it on paper, that then creates something. I don't care if you're coming from a centralized environment like ex-Soviet Union or Russia today or China today or North Korea. If they do something to create something, it came from an individual, never from the state. And that's something that we always have to remember. The state does nothing. It always comes down to the individual. And so in this scenario, there's individuals within Visa that had this idea that said, you know what, we need to create the technology that all these countries could then build their digital currency on. It needs to be somehow privatized or private. It needs to be somewhat centralized, but then it also has to be on blockchain. There has to be different elements to it. Hence, Visa getting into the game. Hence, Ripple with the RippleNet solution being the rails. They've laid out the railroad. Imagine, you go out into the old west, and there is maybe this tiny little town set up somewhere, or maybe not, but they're laying railroad tracks all over the United States to get people from the East Coast to the West Coast. And people said, why in the world is there a train track going through the desert into this barren environment? And soon enough, the towns started popping up on the rail lines. Same thing with the rivers. If you go to Europe or Africa or Latin America, wherever, and back in the heyday when you needed the rivers to transport product and goods. And so people lived along the rivers because those are the transport corridors, and so same thing when it comes to digital asset and cryptocurrency. You need the rails that are going to connect everything. And it's interesting. I know I just a little bit of time here and we're going to get to the point. I need to get to shouting out some people from the last video, but building the structure takes years upon years upon years. Having the foresight. My last video, I talked a little bit about Chris Larson. The reason why I keep going back to Ripple and what they're doing is because they're doing it. Others are doing nothing. They haven't built the real world platform of real world utility of this blockchain, of this digital asset space. We're seeing that, in many environments, they're starting to use blockchain, or they have the hypothesis of where blockchain can fit in. Ripple has been utilizing blockchain and instituted cryptocurrency as part of their ODL. Now they're talking about a loan solution to have a lending environment to create working capital for these large institutions as they're providing ODL for full liquidity. It's really amazing what they've done. But if you think back to what Chris Larsen has done over the years, and I talked about this on the last video with his e-loans, the first online mortgaging, and then with Prosper, the first peer-to-peer lending platform, and then with RippleNet. And it's always creating this foundation and being in this environment, to allow this transactional environment between individuals, cutting out a lot of the fat. Now, if you think about what it takes to move money before using Swift, and what it, the mechanism of using the old way of doing things with old currency. So you have like a RippleNet, you have R3, you have, all these other mechanisms that started to lay the foundation. But now you have Visa. And this is a really, really important aspect, because although Visa could have the software platform that allows them to build on, you still need the transactional method that will allow one currency to transact to another currency across state lines. And you need competition. Competition is good. So it's amazing that you have, this is being built up. And now it's amazing because we can highlight it. When I talk about we're in this, global war right now, from a trade perspective, from an economic perspective, all of this factors in to one another. So again, we could go into an argument about, oh, you're right or you're wrong because, I believe in socialism, I believe in freedom, I believe in totalitarian dictatorships and communism. We can have that political argument all we want, but when it comes right down to it, the facts on the ground are the reality of what's happening. And in order to push this blockchain and digital asset and cryptocurrency space forward, real world utility is needed. And so now that we're seeing, all of the things that are happening, but it's amazing. It really is amazing, when we see what Visa is doing. And this goes back to, this is a quote from, this was Chris Giancarlo, and everyone knows Giancarlo. We know the name. He's the former chairman of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Now, what he said as a quote, this in this Forbes article, he said, regarding the Visa trademark or patent submission, this confirms when the U.S. does big things like the space program, the internet, there are partnerships between the private and public sector. And that's again it. Private sector is critical. This patent filing is evidence the private sector is very much at work on the future of money. And so it's not just about Visa. It's also about all the other programs that have been going on. Without all the other programs, without Bitcoin, without Ethereum, without Ripple, without there's so many projects out there. Without those, this wouldn't be possible. We wouldn't even be sitting here having this conversation that Visa is getting into the system. And we have to think that as RippleNet has been involved in this global space, why is RippleNet now talking about money for working capital in these large institutions and potentially governments and everything else? Why is it now? It's really timely that things start happening and you start seeing everything unfold. And so this is where I get back to, I want to get now to shouting out some people. So Evans, I don't know, Evans, this is from the other channel. If you guys don't know, we have two channels. We have this channel where we live stream, and we have the other channel where we have our shorter, like 10-minute videos. So I did the last one, my last video over there, Ripple XRP, where banks bank creating global liquidity. So that posted yesterday, but Evans commented on that video, and I think it's really interesting. He said maybe the old system is to be so bad that the governments have no choice but to introduce a new digital system to get liquidity into the system. I thought that was really a great comment. Guillermo Teo, he had posted here, thanks, Jeff. This is very interesting. I can't wait until we hear Ripple elaborate more on that subject of loans. These guys are doing amazing things. Louis S. said, digital assets are the future Amazons. Let's see, Scott Osborne, said in this case, he said one bank replaces all central banks. Sounds like some Rothschild conspiracy. And I was going to write a comment, but in this case, is XRP going to be the one bank? I don't think they're the one bank. I think they're just one of many offering a better solution as they get into this lending space. I don't think they're going to be the one bank, but it is a place where banks, financial institutions, and large corporations can easily go to get working capital through ODL and get and take advantage of immediate liquidity. Game changer. And I know that Chris Larson behind that, again, we talked about him, but that, we know that when he puts his mind to something, what he does is actually relatively successful. As E-Loans, he sold for a shit ton of money. As Prosper has been around since 06, doing amazing things in peer-to-peer lending and really changed that space as well. And so here's another one, and I thought it was interesting as well. So as you're starting to figure out how does everything work together, nobody knows what the answer is of how blockchain and crypto and digital currencies and central bank currencies and all that stuff as they're trying to piece together. Because if it was science and technology, you just wrote it out, you say plug A into B and C, and here's the this, everything works perfectly. But then you have politics, and you have the geopolitics, and you have the individuals involved, and you have, free countries, and you have totalitarian dictatorships, and you have communism and socialism and all these different elements that are somehow going to have to plug in together. Because the one thing that SWIFT did around the world, regardless of where they are, centralized or not, in authoritarianism, they all decided that there's one mechanism where all these banks play nice, and it was through SWIFT. That was the old way of doing it. We know that it's broken. It needs a new way. We know that all these digital currency environments have to come together. But the one thing is, as you have this changing world and the changing schemes, you also have to adjust your marketing concept and adjust the direction of your company. You can't say, I'm going this way, I don't care what anybody else is doing, and I'm going to keep doing it this way. I'm not going to pay any attention to anything else. This is it. If you do that, you're going out of business. Unless you have that one initiative where people say, oh, you're stupid, that's not going to work. That's different. Like what they did with Amazon. Oh, you'll never be able to sell books online. Facebook, you're never going to succeed. That's stupid. Twitter, who's going to want to, post comments online? YouTube, no one's going to want to make videos. That's different. If you're not looking and you say, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to pay any attention to my surrounding at all, I'm not going to see how things are changing, that's not good. And that's basically where SWIFT has been. We've got this initiative. This is how we do it. And we're not going to make any adjustments into it. And we're going to do it our way, regardless of what's going on in the world, because we know what we're doing and we're going to do it this way. And so it's interesting. So TZ commented, he said the first plan B was MoneyGram. So are they adjusting into plan Bs, or is it all part of this initiative? I'm going back to what RippleNet is doing, because I think it's interesting. You can say, why are you guys talking about Ripple and XRP so much? Because RippleNet is actually doing something in the space. Ethereum is doing something with smart contracts. I think smart contracts are critical to the overall aspect of business. The decentralized smart contracts are going to also play a part in how business is transacted globally. Smart contracts replacing letter of credit, replacing all these. There's so many elements here. When we look at escrow accounts, and you look at all these non-competes and non-circumvent agreements, and all these lawyers and this and the banks and all these components, you can do away with so much of that fat by having a smart contract that says, this is what we're doing, here's how it's going to work, and this is how everything fits into the puzzle. Here's how the money is going to be distributed. When we do a transaction, everything is going to work a certain way. So with Ripple, they invested heavily into MoneyGram. They're also showing proof case that their ODL, or at that point XRapid, utilizing that as a base premise for moving money, is a functional solution. And here it is. Let's push it forward into the space. The lending through ODL to provide liquidity and provide the financial availability of capital to large institutions is pretty amazing. And so that's like this next step in the game. I think it's really, really amazing. And so with all conflict, so TZ said the first plan B was MoneyGram investment when banks were slow to adopt XRapid. Ripple loans is the second plan B because none of the big names will custody XRP. That in that case, they really don't need to at this point with the exchanges. They don't necessarily have to custody it. But if remitters, custodians, Swift, I'm not sure what WU is, at all won't play nice. Ripple builds a workaround, and so that's the point. But I don't know, the big names, do they need to custody? Do they not need to custody? But providing the loans on the ODL for immediate liquidity is for immediate working capital is pretty amazing. And like TZ said, finding the workaround. They're not going through this life with whatever, with a blindfold on. So that's amazing. That was awesome. Man, what happened to you guys? You kind of slowed down here over the last 30 seconds in comments. Let me see. Let's see. I just want to throw this up here. Brian said, so if I understand correctly, and I haven't done a whole lot of research yet, but so my understanding is Visa is going to register paper money on a blockchain and distribute it. Yeah, it's kind of a crazy thought process there, and that's kind of what they're looking at. I haven't read through the entire patent yet either, but it's kind of bizarre. They want to take a digital dollar. They're going to take the serial number of the digital dollar, register that digital dollar with that serial number on the blockchain, and then you can destroy that digital dollar or the paper dollar because now it's represented on the blockchain space. I don't really fully understand why, that part of it. I guess it kind of makes sense because if you're going to move your currency over to that digital space, you also have to make sure that it's one for one. So they're saying, we're not just going to say, oh, I have $1 million and I'm going to create $1 million, because who's to say your $1 million in currency hasn't been destroyed? But I believe for full transparency, all bills have serial numbers on them or should be serialized. So in that case, for US dollars, we're going to take $1 million here. We're moving it to the blockchain. And you're now going to be using this $1 million in digital format. We're getting rid of and destroying this other $1 million in fiat currency because now it's in digital format. And now you can transact with it in that digital format. So, I believe that, Western Union, there you go. Yep, WU, that makes sense. Thanks, Citizen. So I believe, that kind of makes sense. So then, Brian, so now Visa is going to make digital dollars, but will they be released into circulation, or are they doing digital dollars for their card holders? We need to read more about it. All they did was file for the patent. That doesn't mean that they're actually going to be successful. Doesn't mean they're actually going to roll it out. All it means is they're filing the patent. They haven't even maybe they've tested, maybe they haven't. They put a patent on that concept. All we know is that part of it. We can go through and read their patent in more detail to understand their idea. Doesn't mean they're doing it. Doesn't mean they're even building it. All it means is they filed a patent for it, which is interesting because, again, banks and a lot of these corporations have filed a lot of interesting patents over the years, and none of them have come to fruition. Like Walmart, that filed a patent to implant RFID chips into people that are then tied back to the blockchain and connecting all of your personal health record data through a scan of that RFID chip that's implanted in you. But Walmart's original concept, again, they're hiding behind a positive, and who knows where it could end up going. Their objective in their patent was from an emergency responder perspective on the scene, that they identify the vitals of that individual. They take all the record. A lot of times those notes don't necessarily go back to the ER with that patient. If you have an implanted RFID chip with an unresponsive patient, they come to the ER, they have all their notes and history and et cetera, et cetera. But where could that go? And why is Walmart, putting a patent on an implanted RFID chip for people? So little bit of things to be concerned about. Doesn't mean it's coming to a reality. Maybe it is. I don't know. Next time you go to Walmart, make sure that if you're buying any food, they don't have chips that are being, I don't, but that's what's going to happen. You walk into Walmart, they're going to take your temperature, they're going to scan, they're going to thermal scan you, they're going to take your temperature, and then they're going to give you an injection with an implanted RFID chip to track your movement. Maybe they'll then scan you and put your health records in it, similar to the dogs. We chip our dogs, and they have all their records, and so if they get picked up by a police station or by a vet, and they can scan for the registered number, identifier number on their implantable chip. So if they do it with dogs, imagine how easy it is at that point to do it with humans, because it's been shown that obviously it works in that environment. Obviously, the vet doesn't scan them to get health records, but from an individual perspective, there's so many purposes where they could end up implementing the RFIDs. So, man, this was awesome. You guys have, some really great, comments. Love to take this conversation further. I meant to spend a heck of a lot more time talking about Visa. I've run out of time here. We've got to get to this interview that we're doing with our next guest. We're going to be doing that this morning at 10 a.m. So I need to run to do that. And that's going to be an amazing interview that we're going to then drop on Thursday. Tune in tomorrow night for the interview that we did with CEO Jeremy Kaufman, CEO of Library, LBRY. You guys can learn all about it. Why did they decide to take on YouTube? What are they doing in the blockchain space? How are they compensating content creators? What's going on in that space? What is that all about? How is it different from other platforms out there? Are they the one? How do they work with YouTube now? Why does On the Chain have so much content over there? You guys can decide. Go check it out. Go down below. There's some links over there to get to the other channel. Make sure you guys are subbed to both channels, because on the other channel, we have all the short form, 8-minute videos, 10-minute videos. Those are the videos everybody likes to consume every day. And so go there, sub there, go to our Telegram channel to stay up to date on stuff. Go over to the website, at least register for the email list. You want to get on the email list, as we're going to start rolling out some content that's going to be unique just to that email list. So we're at exactly the 1 hour mark. I want to finish right before that. So you know what, guys? With all good things, it is time to say goodbye. I'll see you guys next time.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.